Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So the intro montage of this episode was working on this piece, which is the first section for Thomas's new mid-pipe. And I finally got to use some of the tools that he brought, and they are life-changing. So the first one was this Tycon and Sequence Manufacturing cutting jig, cutting fixture for the bandsaw. And for thinner wall titanium tubing like this, at this point in time, I'll call it a must. You're not dealing with the bandsaw vise ovaling the tube. It's fully supported the whole way around. Makes nice, easy cuts. And on a day today where it's almost 80 degrees in the shop already, I was able to start the bandsaw, go over to the office with the air conditioning running, relax, not overheat, and the cut did itself. So it makes it kind of an automated process, and that was really nice. And then I also used this Tycon and TIG Aesthetics 4-inch V-band little purge and heat sink fixture to do our first weld. And the first weld came out very nicely. If you guys can see it there. Titanium's a little bit difficult to photograph and take video of, but the purge is beautiful. The outside's beautiful. V-band is nice and flat, and it was just an overall fantastic, great success. So now that we have this first section done, I can go over, put it back on the car, and figure out what the next bend, what the next section is, and we'll go from there. With the first section of the mid-pipe now in place right here, I can take this 45-degree bend and this next section of straight, and the section of straight is not quite long enough, but I can at least figure out how this is going to fit together and how I want it to be aligned to this section of the car right here, as Supras have kind of this cutout in the chassis that the exhaust will run along. So, putting our 45-degree bend up here and our section of straight, you can see that I need to take a little bit of a grind on the 45-degree section, and I'll actually get a little bit longer section of 4-inch straight so I can see as we're coming along the chassis cutout, I can make sure that I'm aligned properly and all of that. Did a little bit of grinding on this elbow to get it to kick down a little bit, to give a little bit more clearance to the chassis. And if I take these two sections of 4-inch straight, one of them's titanium, the other's aluminum, it's just kind of a placeholder right now. If I put everything back into place and do my best to hold it appropriately, we now have the clearance that I was looking for to the chassis. So that says to me that this elbow is good to go. So now it can be welded to the first section of the mid-pipe here, and then I can continue working my way backwards from there. I put the first section of the mid-pipe back in the car, measured out for the next straight section, and we end up right at 18¼ inches with a little bit of an angle on the tube. So I'm going to try something here, and we'll see how it works out. But I'm going to set my next cut at 18¼ there. I'm set at 18¼ and what I'm going to do is attempt to tip this a little bit and then tighten it down in the saw. Hopefully my measurement is still accurate. And with this whole assembly tipped a little bit, I'll effectively make a miter cut on the piece of straight tubing and be able to put the tube in place the way that it needs to be. So, well, I have our miter cut tube, another 45-degree elbow, and a marker. So hopefully I can make use of all these things, get everything aligned, and hopefully this cut lines up the way that I wanted it to. So you guys might not be able to hear me great, or I'll sound like I have something in my mouth, because I obviously do, but if all goes well here, then this will line up, put me in the position that I want to be, and I can take my marker, maybe, make 3 lines, and we're good to go. Yeah, we should be good to go. So I'll take a straight section here, I'll take what we have already made, go over, tack, weld those together, and then we can start working our way back from there. And typically this section on Mark IV Supras and SC300s, and I guess GSs, I'm assuming IS300s are the same way. Toyota seems to have used this same chassis architecture for a number of their vehicles. And this section right here, getting from the downpipe down underneath of the car, typically ends up being the most difficult. So now that we have this squared away, hopefully it should be all downhill from here. After a day's worth of work, Thomas's mid-pipe is coming together very nicely. So everything here is welded, everything that you see, and we just need to go from A to B now. But B needs to be modified a little bit, as I have this guy that needs to go right there somewhere, and there's obviously some tubing on the ETS exhaust that will need to be removed in order to fit that on here. So not a big deal. I'll just have to drop this out and probably make a cut back near this weld here, but that'll be a job for tomorrow. It's getting late now. I'm sweaty. I'm ready to get out of the shop and have a few other odds and ends to do. So I'm going to go and get cleaned up and relax, rest, and recuperate. And tomorrow for me, I'll come in and knock out the rest of this mid-pipe. And for you guys, we'll go ahead and get to that right now. To start today, I need to pull the ETS exhaust off and cut this section out. I'll probably cut back about to where this weld is, put the female half of the new V-band flange, or new V-band assembly rather, onto that section, and then that will give me the space that I need to fit that in there. So I'm hoping, well, actually looking at this, it looks like that cut will more than likely have to be made with the angle grinder, which I'm not super stoked about, but it is what it is, and that's what needs to be done to further this project along. Now that I have the new V-band flange on this ETS exhaust, you can see that this thing fits up pretty near perfect to the ETS exhaust. And I'll actually be able to weld the V-band flange directly to it and eliminate having to cut another section of tube, eliminate having to do another weld, and it'll just be better all around. However, the issue that I'm running into is on the inside of this bend radius, I'm not able to kick this over as far as I need to, at least not easily, without putting weird tension or weird forces on everything. to get it to fit up properly. So I think what I'm going to do is take it, put it in that cutting jig in the bandsaw, and see if I can cut a little bit of this lip off on the inlet side, and then I can weld the V-band flange directly to the outlet side, and all will be well that way. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to grab the body of this pretty effectively with this cutting fixture and be able to make this cut without having to do any weird stuff with the angle grinder or anything along those lines. I can get set up with whatever depth of cut that I want, and I'm going to take a decent chunk of it off. And yeah, we should be good to go. Another day of work in the books and another portion of a project completed. So Thomas now is the proud owner of a titanium mid-pipe, and I guess titanium from turbo back exhaust system on his beautiful, perfect streetcar Supra. So this tied down pipe, or tied mid-pipe rather, is another example of simplicity being complex to make something fit and look organic without using a bunch of pie cuts or having to do anything too crazy as far as miter grinds and miter angles and things like that are concerned. It takes a little bit of planning and a little bit of luck, frankly, but I'm very happy with the way this came out, and it incorporates all of the features that Thomas wanted, being a downstream O2 sensor, or a downstream O2 bung, that deal there, switching out to an actual receiver style V-band assembly as opposed to kind of the cast press deal that was on the ETS or the ETS catback before. All of that is taken care of, and this is a very easy system to install and remove. It's also very light, and I'm very happy with the end result. Now, my welding nerd side of it, there is no color on any of the welds, everything welded crystal clear. The whole system is back purged, and I'm sure you guys, or if you did notice, I did this sequentially in terms of how I welded it. So I would get one joint fit, weld it, next joint fit, weld it, so on and so forth. And the reason that I like to do that, especially on exhaust systems like this, when you weld seam by seam that way, you don't really have to worry too much about things pulling and moving. And frankly, it just makes it easier to weld as well, as you're dealing with a piece that's less cumbersome with each individual weld. And the more pieces that you stack on top of it, obviously it gets a little bit more difficult to contend with. But if I would have just fabricated all of this and then gone through and welded everything, it makes it harder to back purge, harder to get all of the oxygen out of it. It makes it more likely where things can move and not fit up properly when everything is said and done. And it just isn't, in my mind, the best way to do it. So doing it seam by seam, it can take a little bit longer, but you produce a better end result at the end of it. And I'd rather do that than save a few minutes here or there. So again, I'm very happy with the way that this came out. and I hope that Thomas will be as well. And I really can't wait. Granted, the car won't be running by the time it leaves here, but hopefully at some point in the future I'll be able to hear it, as that's always my favorite part, is hearing what these cars sound like when everything is said and done. But all of my rambling aside, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, as I'm sure I look a little bit wet and hot and everything else, and I've been sweating all day and I'm ready to get out of here. So before we do that, let's go ahead and go through the wrap-up procedure. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, for coming along for the ride on Thomas's beautiful Mark IV Supra streetcar project, on my Supra projects, on all of the projects that go on here. I'm still having a blast doing this, and this was a nice change of pace to do some custom work. And you don't hear me say that very often, at least not for customer projects, but this one I have been having a lot of fun with it, and I can't wait to get to the next portions of it. But those next portions will be for the next video, and this one is done at this point in time. So with all that being said, that'll be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.